Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, translated by Constance Garrett. Among those who failed to appear were the genteel lady and her old maidish daughter, who had only been lodgers in the house for the last fortnight, but had several times complained of the noise and uproar in Katerina Ivanova's room, especially when Marmeladov had come back drunk. Katerina Ivanova heard this from Amalia Ivanova, who, quarreling with Katerina Ivanova and threatening to turn the whole family out of doors, had shouted at her that they were not worth the foot of the honorable lodgers whom they were disturbing. Katerina Ivanova determined now to invite this lady and her daughter, whose foot she was not worth, and who had turned away haughtily when she casually met them, so that they might know that she was more noble in her thoughts and feelings and did not harbor malice, and might see that she was not accustomed to her way of living. She had proposed to make this clear to them at dinner with allusions to her late father's governorship, and also at the same time to hint that it was exceedingly stupid of them to turn away on meeting her. The fat colonel major, he was really a discharged officer of low rank, was also absent, but it appeared that he had been not himself for the last 2 days. The party consisted of the Pole, a wretched looking clerk with a spotty face and a greasy coat, who had not a word to say for himself, abominably, a deaf and almost blind old man who had once been in the post office and who had been from immemorial ages maintained by someone at Amalia Ivanova's. A retired clerk of the Secretariat department came too. He was drunk, had a loud and almost unseemly laugh, and only fancy was without a waistcoat. One of the visitors sat straight down to the table without even greeting Katerina Ivanova. Finally, one person having no suit appeared in his dressing gown. But this was too much, and the efforts of Amalia Ivanova and the Pole succeeded in removing him. The Pole brought with him, however, 2 other Poles who did not live at Amalia Ivanova's and whom no one had seen here before. All this irritated Katerina Ivanova intensely. For whom had they made all these preparations then? To make room for the visitors, the children had not even been laid for at the table. But the 2 little ones were sitting on a bench in the furthest corner with their dinner laid on a box, while Polenka, as a big girl, had to look after them, feed them, and keep their noses wiped like well-bred children's. Katerina Ivanova, in fact, could hardly help meeting her guests with increased dignity and even haughtiness. She stared at some of them with special severity and loftily invited them to take their seats, rushing to the conclusion that Amalia Ivanova must be responsible for those who were absent. She began treating her with extreme nonchalance, which the latter promptly observed and resented. Such a beginning was no good omen for the end. All were seated at last. Raskolnikov came in almost at the moment of their return from the cemetery. Katerina Ivanova was greatly delighted to see him in the first place because he was the one educated visitor and, as everyone knew, was in 2 years to take a professorship in the university. And secondly, because he immediately and respectfully apologized for having been unable to be at the funeral. She positively pounced upon him and made him sit on her left hand. Amalia Ivanova was on her right. In spite of her continual anxiety that the dishes should be passed around correctly and that everyone should taste them. In spite of the agonizing cough, which interrupted her every minute and seemed to have grown worse during the last few days, she hastened to pour out in a half whisper to Raskolnikov all her suppressed feelings, her just indignation at the failure of their dinner, interspersing her remarks with lively and uncontrollable laughter at the expense of her visitors and specially of her landlady. It's all that cuckoo's fault. You know whom I mean. Her. Katerina Ivanovna nodded towards the landlady. Look at her. She's making round eyes. She feels that we are talking about her and can't understand. And what does she put on that cap for? Have you noticed that she wants everyone to consider that she is patronizing me and doing me an honor by being here? I asked her, like a sensible woman, to invite people, especially those who knew my late husband. And look at the set of fools she has brought. The sweeps. Look at that one with the spotty face. And those wretched Poles. Not one of them has ever poked his nose in here. I've never set eyes on them. What have they come here for, I ask you? There they sit in a row. Hey, Pan, she cried suddenly to one of them. Have you tasted the pancakes? Take some more. Have some beer. Won't you have some vodka? Look, he's jumped up and is making his bows. They must be quite starved, poor things. Never mind, let them eat. They don't make a noise, anyway, though I'm really afraid for our landlady's silver spoons. Amalia Ivanova, she addressed her suddenly almost aloud. If your spoons should happen to be stolen, I won't be responsible, I warn you. She laughed, turning to Raskolnikov and again nodding towards the landlady in high glee. Her Sally. She didn't understand. She didn't understand again. Look how she sits with her mouth open. An owl. A real owl. An owl in new ribbons. Here her laugh turned again to an insufferable fit of coughing that lasted 5 minutes. Drops of perspiration stood out on her forehead, and her handkerchief was stained with blood. She showed Raskolnikov the blood in silence, and as soon as she could get her breath again, began whispering to him again with extreme animation and a hectic flush on her cheeks. Do you know, I gave her the most delicate instructions, so to speak, for inviting that lady and her daughter. You understand of whom I'm speaking. It needed the utmost delicacy, the greatest nicety, but she has managed things so that that fool, that conceited baggage, that provincial nonentity, simply because she is the widow of a major and has come to try and get a pension and to fray out her skirts in the government offices, because at 50 she paints her face. Everybody knows it. A creature like that did not think fit to come, and has not even answered the invitation, which the most ordinary good manners require. I can't understand why Pyotr Petrovitch has not come. But where's Sonia? Where has she gone? Ah, there she is at last. What is it, Sonia? Where have you been? It's odd that even at your father's funeral you should be so unpunctual. Rodion Romanovich, make room for her beside you. That's your place, Sonia. Take what you like. Have some of the cold entree with jelly. That's the best. They'll bring what you like. They'll bring the pancakes directly. Have they given the children some? Polenka, have you got anything? That's all right. Be a good girl, Lida. And Koila, don't fidget with your feet. Sit like a gentleman. What are you saying, Sonia? Sonia hastened to give her Pyotr Petrovitch's apologies, trying to speak loud enough for everyone to hear and carefully choosing the most respectful phrases which she attributed to Fyodor Petrovich. She added that Fyodor Petrovich had particularly told her to say that as soon as he possibly could. He would come immediately to discuss business alone with her and to consider what could be done for her, etc., etc. Sonia knew that this would comfort Katerina Ivanova, would flatter her and gratify her pride. She sat down beside Raskolnikov. She made him a hurried bow, glancing curiously at him. But for the rest of the time, she seemed to avoid looking at him or speaking to him. She seemed absent minded, though she kept looking at Katerina Ivanova, trying to please her. Neither she nor Katerina Ivanova had been able to get mourning. Sonia was wearing dark brown, and Katerina Ivanova had on her only dress, a dark striped cotton one. The message from Fyodor Petrovich was very successful. Listening to Sonia with dignity, Katerina Ivanova inquired with equal dignity how Fyodor Petrovich was. Then at once whispered, almost aloud, to Raskolnikov that it certainly would have been strange for a man of Fyodor Petrovich's position and standing to find himself in such extraordinary company, in spite of his devotion to her family and his old friendship with her father. That's why I'm so grateful to you, Rodion Romanovich, that you have not disdained my hospitality, even in such surroundings. She added almost aloud, but I'm sure that it was only your special affection for my poor husband that had made you keep your promise. Then, once more with pride and dignity, she scanned her visitors and suddenly inquired aloud across the table of the deaf man. Wouldn't he have some more meat? And had he been given some wine? The old man made no answer and for a long while could not understand what he was asked, though his neighbors amused themselves by poking and shaking him. He simply gazed about him with his mouth open, which only increased the general mirth. What an imbecile! Look, look! Why was he brought? But as to Fyodor Petrovich, I always had confidence in him, Katerina Ivanova continued. And of course he's not like... With an extremely stern face, she addressed Amalia Ivanova so sharply and loudly that the latter was quite disconcerted. Not like your dressed up draggle tails, whom my father would not have taken as cooks into his kitchen, and my late husband would have done them honor if he had invited them in the goodness of his heart. Yes, he was fond of the drink. He was fond of it. He did drink, cried the Syriot clerk, gulping down his 12th glass of vodka. My late husband certainly had that weakness, and everyone knows it. Katerina Ivanova attacked him at once, but he was a kind and honorable man who loved and respected his family. The worst of it was his good nature made him trust all sorts of disreputable people, and he drank with fellows who were not worth the sole of his shoe. Would you believe it, Rodion Romanovich? They found a gingerbread cock in his pocket. He was dead drunk, but he did not forget the children. A cock? Did you say a cock? Shouted the commissariat clerk. Katerina Ivanova did not vouchsafe a reply. She sighed, lost in thought. No doubt you think, like everyone, that I was too severe with him. She went on addressing Raskolnikov. But that's not so. He respected me. He respected me very much. He was a kind-hearted man, and how sorry I was for him sometimes. He would sit in a corner and look at me. I used to feel so sorry for him. I used to want to be kind to him and then would think to myself, be kind to him and he will drink again. It was only by severity that you could keep him within bounds. Yes, he used to get his hair pulled pretty often, roared the commissariat clerk again, swallowing another glass of vodka. Some fools would be better for a good drubbing, as well as having their hair pulled. I'm not talking of my late husband now. Katerina Ivanova snapped at him. The flush on her cheeks grew more and more. Her chest heaved. In another minute, she would have been ready to make a scene. Many of the visitors were sniggering, evidently delighted. They began poking the commissariat clerk and whispering something to him. They were evidently trying to egg him on. Allow me to ask, what are you alluding to? Began the clerk. That is to say, whose, about whom, did you say just now? But I don't care. That's nonsense. Widow, I forgive you. Pass. And he took another drink of vodka. Raskolnikov sat in silence, listening with disgust. He only ate from politeness, just tasting the food that Katerina Ivanova was continually putting on his plate to avoid hurting her feelings. He watched Sonia intently, but Sonia became more and more anxious and distressed. She too foresaw that the dinner would not end peaceably, and saw with terror Katerina Ivanova's growing irritation. She knew that she, Sonia, was the chief reason for the genteel lady's contemptuous treatment of Katerina Ivanova's invitation. She had heard from Amalia Ivanova that the mother was positively offended at the invitation and had asked the question, how could she let her daughter sit down beside that young person? Sonia had a feeling that Katerina Ivanova had already heard this, and an insult to Sonia meant more to Katerina Ivanova than an insult to herself, her children, or her father. Sonia knew that Katerina Ivanova would not be satisfied now till she had shown those draggle tails that they were both. To make matter worse, someone passed Sonia from the other end of the table a plate with two hearts pierced with an arrow cut out of black bread. Katerina Ivanova flushed crimson and at once said aloud across the table that the man who sent it was a drunken ass. Amalia Ivanova was foreseeing something amiss, and at the same time deeply wounded by Katerina Ivanova's haughtiness, and to restore the good humor of the company and raise herself in their esteem, she began, apropos of nothing, telling a story about an acquaintance of hers, Karl from the chemist's, who was driving one night in a cab, and that the cabman wanted him to kill, and Karl very much begged him not to kill, and wept and clasped his hands, and frightened and from fear pierced his heart. Though Katerina Ivanova smiled, she observed at once that Amalia Ivanova ought not to tell anecdotes in Russian. The latter was still more offended, and she retorted that her Vater aus Berlin was a very important man and always went with his hands in his pockets. Katerina Ivanova could not restrain herself and laughed so much that Amalia Ivanova lost patience and could scarcely control herself. Listen to the owl. Katerina Ivanova whispered at once, her good humor almost restored. She meant to say that he kept his hands in his pockets, but she said he put his hands in people's pockets. And have you noticed, Rodion Romanovich, that all these Petersburg's foreigners, the Germans specially, are all stupider than we? Can you fancy any one of us telling how Karl from the chemist's pierced his heart from fear, and that idiot, instead of punishing the cabsman, clasped his hands and wept and begged? Ah, the fool! And you know, she fancies it's very touching and does not suspect how stupid she is. To my thinking, that drunken commissariat clerk is a great deal cleverer. Anyway, one can see that he has addled his brains with drink. But you know, these foreigners are always so well behaved and serious. Look how she sits glaring. She is angry. Regaining her good humor, Katerina Ivanova began at once telling Raskolnikov that when she had obtained her pension, she intended to open a school for the daughters of the gentlemen in her native town. This was the first time she had spoken to him of the project, and she launched out into the most alluring details. It suddenly appeared that Katerina Ivanova had in her hands the very certificate of honor of which Marmeladov has spoken to Raskolnikov in the tavern. When he told him that Katerina Ivanova, his wife, had danced the shawl dance before the governor and other great personages on leaving school. This certificate of honor was obviously intended now to prove Katerina Ivanova's right to open a boarding school, but she had armed herself with it chiefly with the object of overwhelming those two stuck up draggle-tails if they came to the dinner and proving incontestably that Katerina Ivanova was of the noble, she might even say aristocratic family, a colonel's daughter, and was far superior to certain adventurers who had been so much to the fore of late. This certificate of honor immediately passed into the hands of the drunken guests, and Katerina Ivanova did not try to retain it, for it actually contained the statement toute lettre that her father was of the rank of major and also a companion of an order, so that she really was almost the daughter of a colonel. Warming up, Katerina Ivanova proceeded to enlarge on the peaceful and happy life they would lead on the gymnasium, teachers whom she would engage to give lessons in her boarding school. One of the most respectable old Frenchmen, one man got, who had taught Katerina Ivanova herself in the old days and was living there, and would no doubt teach in her school on moderate terms. Next, she spoke of Sonia, who would go with her there and help her in all her plans. At this, someone at the further end of the table gave a sudden guffaw. Though Katerina Ivanova tried to appear to be disdainfully unaware of it, she raised her voice and began at once, speaking with conviction of Sonia's undoubted ability to assist her, of her gentleness, patience, devotion, generosity, and good education. Tapping Sonia on the cheek and kissing her warmly twice. Sonia flushed crimson, and Katerina Ivanova suddenly burst into tears, immediately observing that she was nervous and silly, and that she was too much upset, that it was time to finish, and as the dinner was over, it was time to hand round the tea. At that moment, Amalia Ivanova, deeply aggrieved at taking no part in the conversation and not being listened to, made one last effort and with secret misgivings ventured on an exceedingly deep and weighty observation that in the future boarding school she would have to pay particular attention to Russia, and that there certainly must be a good dame to look after the linen, and secondly, that the young ladies must not novels at night read. Katerina Ivanova, who certainly was upset and very tired, as well as heartily sick of the dinner, at once cut short Amelia Ivanova's saying she knew nothing about it and was talking nonsense, that it was the business of the laundry maid and not of the directress of the high class boarding school to look after the washer. And as for the novel reading, that was simply rudeness, and she begged her to be silent. Amalia Ivanova, fired up and getting angry, observed that she only meant her good, and that she had meant her very good, and that it was long since she had paid her gold for the lodgings. Katerina Ivanova at once set her down, saying that it was a lie to say that she wished her good, because only yesterday, when her dead husband was lying on the table, she had worried her about the lodgings. To this, Amalia Ivanova very appropriately observed that she had invited those ladies, but those ladies had not come, because those ladies are ladies and cannot come to a lady who is not a lady. Katerina Ivanova at once pointed out to her that as she was a slut, she could not judge what made one really a lady. Amalia Ivanova at once declared that her father aus Berlin was a very, very important man, and both hands in her pockets went, and always used to say, "Poof, poof." And she leapt up from the table to represent her father, sticking her hands in her pockets, puffing her cheeks, and uttering vague sounds resembling poof, poof, amid loud laughter from all the lodgers, who purposely encouraged Amalia Ivanova, hoping for a fight. And this was too much for Katerina Ivanova, and she at once declared, so that all could hear, that Amalia Ivanova probably never had a father, but was simply a drunken Petersburg Finn, and had certainly once been a cook and probably something worse. Amalia Ivanova turned as red as a lobster and squealed that perhaps Katerina Ivanova never had a father. But she had a father aus Berlin, and that he wore a long coat and always said, "Poof, poof, poof." Katerina Ivanova observed contemptuously that all knew what her family was, and that on that very certificate of honor it was stated in print that her father was a colonel, while Amalia Ivanova's father, if she really had one, was probably some Finnish milkman. But that probably she never had a father at all, since it was still uncertain whether her name was Amalia Ivanova or Amalia Ludvigovna. At this, Amalia Ivanova lashed to fury, struck the table with her fist, and shrieked that she was Amalia Ivanova, not Tvigovna, that her father was named Johann, and that he was a burgomaster, and that Katerina Ivanova's father was quite never a burgomaster. Katerina Ivanova rose from her chair, and with a stern and apparently calm voice, though she was pale and her chest was heaving, observed that if she dared for one moment to set her contemptible wretched of a father on a level with her papa, she, Katerina Ivanova, would tear her cap off her head and trample it underfoot. Amalia Ivanova ran about the room, shouting at the top of her voice that she was mistress of the house and that Katerina Ivanova should leave the lodgings that minute. Then she rushed for some reason to collect the silver spoons from the table. There was a great outcry and uproar. The children began crying. Sonia ran to restrain Katerina Ivanova, but when Amalia Ivanova shouted something about the yellow ticket, Katerina Ivanova pushed Sonia away and rushed at the landlady to carry out her threat. At that minute, the door opened and Pyotr Petrovich and Lucihin appeared on the threshold. He stood scanning the party, severe and vigilant eyes. Katerina Ivanova rushed to him. Chapter 3. Pyotr Petrovich, she cried, "Protect me, you at least. Make this foolish woman understand that she can't behave like this to a lady in misfortune. That there is a law for such things. I'll go to the Governor General himself. He shall answer for it. Remembering my father's hospitality, protect these orphans. Allow me, madame. Allow me." Pyotr Petrovich waved off. "Your papa, as you are well aware, I had not the honor of knowing." Someone laughed aloud. "And I do not intend to take part in your everlasting squabbles with Amalia Ivanova. I have come here to speak of my own affairs, and I want to have a word with your stepdaughter, Sofya Ivanova. I think it is. Allow me to pass." Pyotr Petrovich, edging by her, went to the opposite corner where Sonia was. Katerina Ivanova remained standing where she was, as though thunderstruck. She could not understand how Pyotr Petrovich could deny having enjoyed her father's hospitality. Though she had invented it herself, she believed in it firmly by this time. She was struck too by the businesslike, dry, and even contemptuous menacing tone of Pyotr Petrovich. All the clamor gradually died away at his entrance. Not only was this serious businessman strikingly incongruous with the rest of the party, but it was evident too that he had come upon some matter of consequence, that some exceptional cause must have brought him here, and that therefore something was going to happen. Raskolnikov, standing beside Sonia, moved aside to let him pass. Pyotr Petrovich did not seem to notice him. A minute later, Zyatnikov too appeared in the doorway. He did not come in, but stood still, listening with marked interest, almost wonder, and seemed for a time perplexed. Excuse me for possibly interrupting you, but it's a matter of some importance, Pyotr Petrovich observed, addressing the company generally. I am glad indeed to find other persons present. Amalia Ivanova, I humbly beg you, as mistress of the house, to pay careful attention to what I have to say to Sofya Ivanova. Sofya Ivanova, he went on addressing Sonia, who was very much surprised and already alarmed. Immediately after your visit, I found that 100 ruble note was missing from my table in the room of my friend, Mr. Lebeziatnikov. If in any way whatever you know and will tell us where it is now, I assure you on my word of honor and call all present to witness that the matter shall end there. In the opposite case, I shall be compelled to have a recourse to very serious measures, and then you must blame yourself. Complete silence reigned in the room. Even the crying children were still. Sonia stood deadly pale, staring at Lucian and unable to say a word. She seemed not to understand. Some seconds passed. Well, how is it to be then? Asked Lucian, looking intently at her. I don't know. I know nothing about it, Sonia articulated faintly at last. No? You know nothing, Lucian repeated, and again he paused for some seconds. Think a moment. Mozella, he began severely, but still, as it were, admonishing her. Reflect. I'm prepared to give you time for consideration. Kindly observe this. If I were not so entirely convinced, I should not, you may be sure, with my experience, venture to accuse you so directly, seeing that for such a direct accusation before witnesses, if false or even mistaken, I should myself, in a certain sense, be made responsible. I am aware of that. This morning I changed for my own purposes several 5% securities for the sum of approximately 3,000 rubles. The account is noted down in my pocketbook. On my return home, I proceeded to count the money, as Mr. Lebeziatnikov will bear witness, and after counting 2,300 rubles, I put the rest in my pocketbook in my coat pocket. About 500 rubles remained on the table, and among them 3 notes of 100 rubles each. At that moment you entered at my invitation, and all the time you were present, you were exceedingly embarrassed, so that 3 times you jumped up in the middle of the conversation and tried to make off. Mr. Lebeziatnikov can bear witness to this. You yourself, Damoiselle, probably will not refuse to confirm my statement that I invited you through Mr. Lebeziatnikov solely in order to discuss with you the hopeless and destitute position of your relative, Katerina Ivanova, whose dinner I was unable to attend, and the advisability of getting up something of the nature of a subscription, lottery, or a hike for her benefit. You thanked me and even shed tears. I describe all this as it took place, primarily to recall it to your mind and secondly to show you that not the slightest detail has escaped my recollection. Then I took a 10 ruble note from the table and handed it to you by way of first installment, on my part for the benefit of your relative. Mr. Lebeziatnikov saw all this. Then I accompanied you to the door, you being still in the same state of embarrassment, after which, being left alone with Mr. Lebeziatnikov, I talked to him for 10 minutes. Then Mr. Lebeziatnikov went out and I returned to the table with the money lying on it, intending to count it and to put it aside, as I proposed doing before. To my surprise, 100 ruble note had disappeared. Kindly consider the position. Mr. Lebeziatnikov, I cannot suspect. I am ashamed to allude to such a supposition. I cannot have made a mistake in my reckoning, for the minute before your entrance, I had finished my accounts and found the total correct. You will admit that, recollecting your embarrassment, your eagerness to get away, and the fact that you kept your hands for some time on the table, and taking into consideration your social position and the habits associated with it, I was, so to say, with horror and positively against my will, compelled to entertain a suspicion, a cruel but justifiable suspicion. I will add further and repeat that in spite of my positive conviction, I realize that I run a certain risk in making this accusation. But as you see, I could not let it pass. I have taken action and I will tell you why. Solely, madame, solely, owing to your black ingratitude. Why, I invite you for benefit of your destitute relative. I present you with my donation of 10 rubles and you, on the spot, repay me for all that with such an action. It is too bad. You need a lesson. Reflect, moreover, like a true friend. I beg you, and you could have no better friend at this moment. Think what you are doing, otherwise, I shall be immovable. Well, what do you say? I have taken nothing, Sonia whispered in terror. You gave me 10 rubles. Here it is. Take it. Sonia pulled her handkerchief out of her pocket, untied the corner, took out the 10 ruble note, and gave it to Luzahin. And the 100 rubles you do not confess to taking? He insisted reproachfully, not taking the note. Sonia looked about her. All were looking at her with such awful, stern, ironical, hostile eyes. She looked at Raskolnikov. He stood against the wall with his arms crossed, looking at her with glowing eyes. Good God, broke from Sonia. Amalia Ivanova, we shall have to send a word to the police, and therefore I humbly beg you meanwhile to send for the house porter. Luzahin said softly and even kindly. I knew she was a thief, cried Amalia Ivanova, throwing her hands up in the air. You knew it? Luzahin caught up. Then I suppose you have some reason before this for so thinking. I beg you, worthy Amalia Ivanova, to remember your words which have been uttered before witnesses. There was a buzz of loud conversation on all sides. All were in movement. What? Cried Katerina Ivanova, suddenly realizing the position, and she rushed at Luzahin. What? You accuse her of stealing? Sonia! Ah, the wretches, the wretches! And running to Sonia, she flung her wasted arms round her and held her as in a vice. Sonia, how dared you take 10 rubles from him? Foolish girl, give it to me. Give me the 10 rubles at once. Here. And snatched the note from Sonia. Katerina Ivanova crumpled it up and flung it straight into Luzahin's face. It hit him in the eye and fell on the ground. Amalia Ivanova hastened to pick it up. Pyotr Petrovitch lost his temper. Hold that mad woman, he shouted. At that moment, several other persons beside Lebeziatnikov appeared in the doorway, among them the two ladies. What, mad? Am I mad? Idiot, shrieked Katerina Ivanovna. You are an idiot yourself. Sonia, take his money. Sonia, a thief. Why, she'd give away her last penny. And Katerina Ivanovna broke into hysterical laughter. Did you ever see such an idiot? She turned from side to side. And you too, she suddenly saw the landlady. And you too, sausage eater, you declare that she is a thief. You trashy Prussian hen's leg in a crinoline. She hasn't been out of this room. She came straight from you. You wretched man, and sat down beside me. Everyone saw her. She sat here by Rodion Romanovich. Search her. Since she is not left the room, the money would be on her. Search her, search her. But if you don't find it, then excuse me, my dear fellow. You'll answer for it. I'll go to our sovereign, to our gracious Tsar himself, and throw myself at his feet today, this minute. I'm alone in the world. They would let me in. Do you think they wouldn't? You're wrong. I'll get in. You reckon on her meekness. You relied upon that. But I'm not so submissive. Let me tell you, you've gone too far yourself. Search her. Search her.